I'm Ben Self. I'm the Vice President of the Foundation and the Director of the Mansfield Fellows Program for a little over 5 years now. So I was Director when both Monica and Charlie were Mansfield Fellows, and really pleased and grateful to them that they're able to join this info session today. It's a very strange time, as I was saying. COVID-19 has disrupted a lot of things. It disrupted the fellowship year for the 24th class, who would normally be coming home in a couple weeks. They're all done, had to end their fellowship year early. And it's already disrupted the 25th class, who should have been heading over to Japan in early July. They won't be going then, and we're not sure exactly when they will deploy. So everything is up in the air, but it still has a bright future as a program because we have strong support from both governments of the United States and Japan, strong support from the peoples of the United States and Japan for this partnership. And we really believe there's a tremendous future for U.S. Japan cooperation at the government to government level, which is what our Mansfield Fellows achieve and accomplish. I'd like to ask Monica and Charlie to each introduce themselves briefly and describe how they came to the Mansfield Fellowship Program. Monica, why don't you go ahead and start?
Sure, I'm Monica Herrera. I was interested in the Mansfield program actually since I was in college. I went to the Air Force Academy. I was interested in becoming a foreign area officer in the Air Force. And so I participated on the fellowship while I was still on active duty. And there's a program that through an Air Force Fellows program through which you can kind of apply and then apply directly to the foundation. So that's how I applied. And I was in the 20th class. So I was in Japan in 2015, 2016. On active duty, and I did become a foreign area officer in the Air Force. I'm not active duty anymore, but I'm still in the reserve, still fulfilling that role. And then my primary job, I work on the Women, Peace and Security Program at U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, and that was actually the foundation of my placement plans when I was in Japan, was working on women, peace and security, doing research, working in a range of different placements that were kind of focused on gender mainstreaming. So that's really where I was able to gain that expertise to kind of then slowly work through the Air Force and then within the Department of Defense to continue that work today. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm happy to answer questions later on.
Super. And over to you, Charlie, please.
Great. Hi, I'm Charlie Mahaffey. I'm with the Department of State. I had found out about the Mansfield program just about as soon as I started working at the State Department, which was about 16 years ago. I had been a JET participant many years ago, so I always knew I had an interest in Japan, a strong relationship with Japan, and was always interested in finding a way to get back and to experience it again. In the work that I've been doing at the State Department, there's a lot of overlap with Japan. I work on nuclear issues, nuclear weapons proliferation, nuclear disarmament, the use of nuclear energy. And so obviously we work very closely with Japan on all of those issues. And I always kind of was blown away by how many experts there were on the other side of the table, that people on the Japanese side seem to know our system inside and out. They're fluent in our language, fluent in our system. And none of us really were. And people had looked to me almost as if I was a Japan expert. And I felt like a fraud because I didn't have anywhere near the depth that my counterparts did. And then it really hit me that the Mansfield program is the best way that tool that we have to really develop those skills, gain that kind of expertise in the Japanese system in Japan in general. Very few opportunities like that out there, and nothing like Mansfield. So I was there 2017, 2018 in the 22nd class, which is a very interesting time to be there at the beginning of the Trump administration, and a lot of uncertainty that absolutely was felt on the Japanese side in the relationship, in our commitment to the region and to the relationship. But it was a fascinating insight, and we can get into that more later in the discussion. But yeah, I guess I'll leave it there.
Wonderful. I'm grateful to both of you for your service as alumni, and we do always appreciate when alumni stay engaged with the foundation and help us with info sessions and so forth, and other program areas. If we're doing programs outside of Mansfield Fellows program, sometimes we also manage to draw on the expertise within the Fellows alumni community. But I also wanted the two of you, because you each bring slightly different experiences, a civilian and a uniformed personnel, single and with a family with children. And so it gives more personal experiences of what life is like as a Mansfield Fellow that you might share if we have questions specifically from any of the attendees. I do have disappointing news, I think, for everybody, is that we won't be making selections for the 26th class in the normal time frame in November because of the COVID-19 imposed suspension of all international exchange programs. The State Department has informed us that we can't start the 25th class as expected in July. And so everything will be pushed back by at least 6 months, if not a full year. Still, we'd love to sustain interest and keep the 26th and 27th and 28th class full of wonderful applicants. So we're happy to answer questions about how the program operates. Let me just, one of the key stages is getting chosen. And the program has become more selective than ever. We had 60 applicants for the 25th class, which is a record number. And we expect high levels of interest to continue in among federal employees for the opportunity to work and live in Japan for a year. So winning out in that competition will require a really strong proposal, a strong candidacy. And we have two of our top-notch applicants here to explain how they winnowed through, or how they managed to navigate through the application process. I think obviously your background and your previous study of Japan and so on is important, but to me the placement plan in your proposal, the work plan that you have, what you will accomplish, and how that will then benefit your home agency, really stands out as one of the things the selection committee always evaluates most heavily, most seriously. So I wanted each of you, starting with Charlie, to talk about your placement plan, how you devised it, and how you developed it over time.
Sure, I think that's really key. And while your placement plan itself doesn't really gel or form or solidify until you've already been chosen, I think having an idea, a very strong set of goals, what you want to accomplish, and what your home agency can benefit, why they would benefit from you being chosen, you need to be thinking about that immediately, because part of your application, of course, is explaining what a superstar you are and why the foundation would be crazy to let you to pass you by. The other half of that is your conversation with your home agency and why it's in their interest that they part with you and they continue to pay you for a year, knowing that you're going to be out of pocket for them. And so in my case, it was pretty easy because, as I mentioned, we've been working very closely with the Japanese, with the Ministry of Defense, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, METI and MEXT, for several years, and we had developed some close personal relationships. And so it was very easy for me to walk into my Deputy Assistant Secretary's office and say, you know what, I could actually work with these guys for a year and come back and tell you how we need to be engaging with them better and improve the cooperation, the patterns of cooperation that we already have. And it was a very quick conversation. He realized, yeah, I see how we would benefit from that. That said, when I came back, I think he was floored. He was blown away by just how much we as an organization gained from me being there for the full year. Understanding how those Japanese ministries work with each other, how they work with us, where they get their information when they're talking to us, when they gather information, who they see as reliable partners. I mean, all these kind of inside baseball that we normally would have no access to at all. I was given front row seats to for a full year. So I think my case, again, it was a bit unique in that we already had such close cooperation with these Japanese agencies, and to build together a plan was not too difficult. But for those in a different case, I think even if you don't have those relationships between your agencies already established, it's what you can expect to learn and what you definitely will learn over the 12 months of the program. The flexibility, the being able to be in a completely outside of your skin, basically, in a situation where you don't really know what's going on, but there's a lot expected of you, and you're under some pressure, and you're going to need to perform flawlessly. That's going to happen over the course of the year. You're going to develop those skills. You're going to learn that flexibility. You're going to gain perspectives on the problems that your home agency is working on, learning how the Japanese deal with these issues. And they're all the same issues. There are no problems that we as a government are trying to solve that the Japanese are not also trying to solve. And in most cases, we're trying to do it together. It's why it is the most important relationship in the world. And bar none. And it's important in the early stages of developing your application, making those points, understanding them yourselves, making them to your supervisor to get that initial buy-in from them, because that's key. It doesn't matter how much Mansfield likes you, if your home agency is not on board, you're not going to get very far. So focusing early on convincing them why this year for you, as amazing as it's going to be personally, how it's going to benefit your office, what they do, what you're going to learn from a year in Japan.
So my experience is definitely a lot different being on active duty. You never really know what your future assignments are going to hold in store for you. So, I had, all of the kind of military fellows, especially the Air Force fellows, because that's who I'm most familiar with, are thinking about what are the different possibilities for my future as an officer, and what are some of those unique skill sets, the unique expertise that I could get out of this fellowship that will set me apart from the other, defense fellows or the other Air Force fellows, to say each of us, when we go on this fellowship, we're gaining something different and bringing it back to the Air Force, so that holistically as an organization, we have this broad, each of us has specific expertise that cover a broad range of, defense cooperation activities and engagements that we do with Japan. So my placement plan definitely evolved quite a bit. The first step that I took was reaching out to former Air Force fellows to kind of see how did you do this? What did you find to be most useful? And for us, getting experience in the Ministry of Defense, specifically in their joint staff and their air staff, and certain bureaus, is really important to have to gain a comprehensive understanding of all the different defense cooperation activities that we conduct with Japan, and what are some of their strategic priorities, some of their operational approaches to engaging with the U.S., really trying to understand from their perspective. So that was kind of first. And then second was, okay, what is the unique thing about me and the thing that I am passionate about, and that also will down the line benefit DOD. And for me, my master's is in sociology. I did, I minored in Japanese. I did grad school work on Japan. I was really interested in, these sociocultural elements, and also this element of women's empowerment and engagement in society, and particularly in the defense and security sector. That kind of understanding of women, peace, and security came a little bit later, but being able to pull that out in my kind of initial intent to say, this is kind of an area that I think can be really valuable, and that we don't have a lot of engagement with Japan on this area. I would like to learn more about that. And then later, after selection and you work with the National Personnel Authority of Japan, getting your objectives right really helps them shape and right size your placement plan, and identify maybe some agencies that you can't necessarily know all the agencies that are out there in the Japanese government for you to potentially work with. So there was an organization within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Foreign Policy Bureau, that I had never heard of because it was new as of about a year or two before I went. And they were able to say, I think this agency is based on your objectives and kind of based on kind of this unique theme that you have going on, would be a really good fit. And so I spent 3 months there as my first placement in the gender mainstreaming division there in MOFA. And that really kind of helped shape the whole rest of my focus on research throughout the whole year. And as an Air Force Fellow, we are managed also simultaneously by an Air Force Fellows program that encourages us to develop research papers, and we have some other things that we have to do on the Air Force side. So that was, it's an iterative process, but identifying upfront kind of your objectives and what makes your approach unique and what your agency will get back that is kind of a novel new area. Or that builds upon, previous work that's, been done with U.S. Japan, with the U.S. Japan relationship. So yeah, definitely a different type of approach from some of the other agencies, because it's impossible to say, where I was going to get assigned next.
Thank you, Monica. Both the State Department and the Air Force have a tremendous amount of cooperation with Japan. Some federal agencies don't, and we're aware that there may not even be an alum from your own agency if you're interested. We've got in our 25th class some Department of Interior fellows. They're the very first we've ever had from Interior, and so they don't have that same precedent, and they don't have that same large basket of cooperation where they're thinking, what's my place within this overall framework? They have to sort of build something that doesn't exist at all. So there's a whole gamut, really. We support the parts of the US government that already have a tremendous amount of bilateral cooperation with the government of Japan. And then we're always looking to build new threads that connect the two sides, the fabric of the US-Japan relationship. I see we've got a couple of questions already coming in the chat. One about uniformed personnel. Is there a minimum rank that can apply for this fellowship? And Monica, as a uniformed person, maybe you could answer whether the Air Force puts a lower limit on the program participation.
Sure, so this will vary service by service. I will say that former DoD fellows from the Air Force, Marines, and Navy have typically been mid-level, so like 03 captain or Navy lieutenant type of level and above. And that's typically just because kind of getting some of that initial experience within the DoD, we want to make sure that we are able to provide our own perspective when, to actually do some information and knowledge sharing when we go into these agencies. But also, and I can only really speak from the Air Force side, for foreign area officers, which is, they're looking a lot at Mansfield Fellows as potentially joining the Foreign Area Officer Corps. That is a mid-level sort of, I want to say they select from the 7 to 11 or 12 year window of experience for you to get to kind of cross-train into that career field. So that's another reason. I went as a sort of senior captain. So I was an 03 captain my whole year, and then my next assignment, I was a captain for almost the first year coming out. So I was a little bit, I would say, on the more junior side, but I would say, service dependent. Check to make sure that you are eligible to apply through your service. Because you will, at least on the Air Force side, you have to be released by your career field in order to apply to the Mansfield Foundation. And then, again, it's kind of thinking about what can you bring when you go to Japan, because there is obviously a lot where you're in a big receive mode of like trying to understand the Japanese perspective, but they are equally interested in your perspective and your experiences. So having that kind of several years of experience within DoD, probably above the tactical level, where we really starting to talk about, operational and strategic thinking is where you would aim. So I know that's not a very clear answer because it's just not a very cut and dry answer. So I hope that helps.
I thought it was a very clear answer. It's not an answer you can give. It's not a question you can give a yes or no answer to, but it was very clear. I would add that from the selection committee side, the foundation is looking to limit the number of representatives from any one agency. So we don't become a fellowship for the State Department or for the Air Force. We're trying to keep it, distributed across multiple agencies, and that intensifies the competition from within agencies where we've had a popular relationship in the past, especially the Air Force. And I would say typically Air Force is the #1 pool of applicants by number. And so the competition within Air Force officers is even more intense than among civilians, for example. And so with that over time, it's harder and harder. We have had, I believe we had a lieutenant from Space Command, now a Space Force, a lieutenant at the time. But I think it's less and less likely that that's possible. But thank you. Another question up about the Japanese government view of the Mansfield Fellowship Program. I have not been a Mansfield Fellow. So I work with the Japanese government around the program in implementing the program. And I know that we have tremendous amounts of support across different ministries, among Diet members. Generally, the partnership with the United States is seen as critical to Japan's own national interests. And this is an important tool for building a cadre of Americans who can maximize the value of the U.S. Japan relationship to both sides. So we have a tremendous amount of support, but I don't know the inside view as well as Charlie or Monica would. So Charlie, maybe I'll ask you to.
Absolutely. I think it has a huge impact on the Japanese government, and it's probably better. It's a program that is probably better well known within the Japanese government than it is within our government. I remember a conversation I had with a Diet member. It wasn't a Diet member that I was that I did a placement with, but we had a conversation about China's Belt and Road Initiative, and she knew about the Mansfield program and what it was, but she was making this comparison that the Chinese can spend as much money as they want everywhere, but the United States is picking 10 or so people, sending them over to Japan, paying their salaries, paying them extra to learn about Japan, to live Japan, to understand what each of these individual offices are doing. That is an enormous commitment on the part of the United States. And the fact that we only do this with Japan just blows them away even further. That I remember talking once to one of the office confidants I had in Ministry of in MEXT. That's an agency that didn't have a whole lot of contact with the outside world. And I was a little embarrassed at some point because Mansfield is an amazing experience, and you're taken to nice restaurants and given all these opportunities, and you see all these amazing things. And every now and then you start to think, like, do I really deserve this? Is this really, it's just me, right? It's why are you doing this? And her reaction had been, I think you're looking at it wrong. You're not. This isn't just for you. We are seeing how important the United States views the relationship with Japan. And that in itself, and this kind of goes to the point that the Diet member was making, it shows how important this relationship is, that the U.S. is putting these people forward, having a very competitive process and taking the best of the best, and then others like me who get sent over for a year because it's important to us. Not just because it's a reward for winning the prize, winning the chance to go over. It's because the American people, are better served because we are doing that. really seems to resonate with the Japanese. That as much as we say that our relationship with Japan is close and important, the fact that we do this, and we do this every year. I heard one other Diet member actually listing data of for constituents to show how the Americans really do care about us now. And this, again, this is 2017, 2018 timeframe when there was it was a topic of conversation. And the things that he was listing, port visits, the visit of the U.S. NS Mercy ship, and the fact that we have 10 American bureaucrats who are working in the Japanese government. I mean, that's kind of, it's on a par with that this is important to them. It's more than just a great year for us.
Thank you. I'm going to have a little interlude. There's another question specifically for you, Charles. Go ahead and read that. And I will ask Monica to talk a little bit about the year in Japan itself as a fellow, starting with the homestay in Kanazawa. It's a really special, it's obviously the opportunity to spend time with a Japanese family and engage with the Japanese culture and language on a daily basis is really precious. But can you describe some of the Kanazawa experience, and then we'll go back to Charles to answer the question.
Sure. So I'll just start by saying that summer in Kanazawa is probably one of the best summers of my life. It was just an absolutely incredible experience. For 7 weeks, you're going there and, you know, you're doing language classes during, you know, the first half of the day, maybe a little bit into the afternoon. And then the language program that we work with there also organizes cultural activities, tours of other areas, things like that, to really kind of get you to experience some of real Japan, and then to really make it feel like you are really part of the Japanese, you know, fabric of life. The homestay was just an amazing experience. So you're, you know, living, you know, I was living with a wonderful family. They had 2 kids, 10 and 13, and, you know, getting to try, you know, building your Japanese language skills, you know, trying to talk to them about, you know, simple chores and how to do this and that, and food and what do you like and don't like. But then also kind of just seeing what a day-to-day life actually is. You know, everything from how do they negotiate, you know, how does a household run the bath in the evening? How do you determine when your turn is to go into the bath? What about laundry? What happens if you are running late for dinner or things like that? And just really kind of really understand, it gives you that feeling that I'm actually living a typical Japanese lifestyle right now, aside from the fact that you know, your main job is to learn some language and do some cultural immersion. But the lifestyle that was just a really wonderful experience for so many reasons. And I just had such an amazing time. Not to mention, you know, they're helping, you know, cook for you. And, you know, I asked about, can I learn some kind of traditional meals, how to make it, things like that. They're really kind of like they help you navigate the system, how to ride the bus, you know, so I would ride the bus to and from school, just all those kinds of things are like, what just do you need in order to live day to day? And I had been to Japan a few times on shorter immersions, but this, you know, nothing quite like this. So yeah, it was just a wonderful, wonderful summer. I learned so much and I just had a lot of fun too.
Yeah, I think most fellows have a tremendous year, and I've heard overall all the expressions from individual fellows were either that was the best year of my career or that was the best year of my life. And it's really wonderful to hear that the fellowship was so positive, including the homestay. I'll go back over to Charlie if you want to throw out a State Department specific response.
To the question about the State Department question was from Brianna about bidding from the State Department. my experience may be a bit different from yours. I am civil service. I understand, I think most of the Mansfield Fellows from states in the past have been civil service, but not exclusively civil service, precisely for the reason that you cite, that it is outside of the normal bidding cycle. That said, I'm convinced from talking to some of the foreign service officers in my office, it is absolutely possible. I think talking to your CDO, finding a way to make it happen, it would require some advanced planning, obviously, on your part, but it definitely can be done.
I would say the foreign service regs don't permit them to join the fellowship program. We're not discriminating against foreign service officers, but the foreign service itself won't permit foreign service officers to join. And I know sometimes they complain that the opportunities they get don't afford them the insights, as Charlie was saying, from the inside the Japanese government perspective that Mansfield Fellows get. But for whatever reason, they do have the Kato Baker Fellowship for foreign service officers, and that is a way to spend time in Japan if you are an FSO.
Okay, thank you.
Charlie, did you want to weigh in on Kanazawa? For you as a married father, being a kid in somebody else's house for 7 weeks might have been a different experience. We want to be transparent here.
It was amazing. Again, I'm not sure if I say the greatest week, greatest time of my life or my career or both or whatever, but it was awkward in that my wife is Japanese, and so she and our two children were living in one part of Japan while I lived with another family for the summer. I was with an elderly couple who had two children about my age. One lives overseas and the other lives local, but they didn't see her too regularly. So they adopted me immediately. They had a huge house on the beach, and the food was amazing every day. It was like living in a ryokan, basically. Amazing food. I talked to my wife every night, and she would be dealing with the kids, and they were screaming, and they were eating kobini food again or something that night, whereas I had another full course meal laid out, and it was always one or two beers that the father always wanted to have every night. It was like being on vacation. Conversation every night. I think at least the mother spoke English, but for me they spoke in Japanese the whole time, helping me to understand what was going on, talking about the news, talking about everything. Amazing experience. It was awkward, of course, that I was with another family while my family was somewhere else, and that I was having such a great time. But it was one of the high points of the year, that's for sure.
Thank you both. We do have a bit more time if anybody wants to throw up another question. But I also wanted to ask about working with the National Personnel Authority, both on negotiating the placements, because you have back and forth with NPA as you put your placement plan together. But then once you're fellows, the NPA also supports you in different ways. You have to do presentations to them on your progress. You also get to do a tour of some part of Japan with them. Monica, you start. Share your experiences working with the National Personnel Authority.
Yeah, I had a great experience. And again, as I had kind of mentioned earlier, they really helped right off the bat shape a little bit more some of the placements, the specific divisions that they recommended based on some of my objectives. I'd already had a placement plan, but they're like, well, have you considered this particular division does this and this, maybe you should think about this. And so that was really helpful, as I mentioned. And then, during the year, working with them, I did have, a minor change to my placement plan during the year. When I was in the Ministry of Defense, I had presented some of my initial research, and one of the people there, she was like a senior fellow at the National Institute for Defense Studies, and she said, I would really like to work with you a little bit more on your research. Is there any time you can spend at NIDS? And so, working with them to say, can I just get maybe 1 week so that I can work with her and really focus on my research paper and things like that. So, they were great to work with. And the trips, we went on a couple, you know, I think we went down to, where did we go? Down south near Osaka. We did a tour down there, and we spent some time, I think, near Kobe. And just, you know, getting to see some other areas of Japan. And then we spent a little bit of time at Narita Airport, learning a little bit about the history there, which was fascinating. We toured a Toyota factory and Panasonic. So just to see some of the other, those are things that I never would have been able to see in my placement, because they weren't built into my plan. So being able to do that, and then, you know, the reports to them and the presentations really helped practice the writing in Japanese and speaking in Japanese. And so that was good to have those kind of products as sort of summaries of, you know, what I was doing, what I was learning, so that I still have those today to look back on. So yeah, I had a great experience with them.
Thanks. Charlie, did you likewise have a great experience working with NPA?
NPA was very helpful, and for the reasons Monica pointed out, there are so many offices that might be perfect for you that you just have no idea about, and NPA can be very helpful in identifying those for you. I had a bit of a frosty start with NPA, in that one of the agencies that I had put on my work plan that I'd been working with so closely, they were not comfortable at all in me coming to work with them. Our offices had worked so closely together that they saw it as, yeah, that's a bit too much, and we're kind of pushing back. And NPA was really the face of that. So my first interaction with NPA was a lot less cooperative and cordial and everything than I expected. But there was a very specific reason for that, and it wasn't so much them as it was the office that I was seeking to apply. And of course, NPA is there to not just to help us, but really to work for the Japanese government and facilitate on their side. The activities that they put together for us over the course of the year were outstanding. We went out to Kagoshima and Kumamoto and Kyushu. Met with the governors of both of those prefectures and toured all the big sites. We also toured Toyota and Panasonic. They put together a tour of the control room, the Shinkansen control room in Tokyo Station, which was just amazing. Seeing that firsthand. It's something we never would have ever had access to had we tried to do that on our own. The reports, it's challenging, definitely for those who didn't have a strong background in Japanese, and even for those who did. There was one report at the midway point in December, and then a final report in June. But there are resources to help you through that, not just the other fellows, but NPA as well. They make very clear what it is that's expected, and they know to maybe give you some softball questions if that helps the presentation go a little bit better. But they definitely are a resource, and it's just one more of the different ways that make this program function as well as it does.
Thank you. I see another question about the timeline of the selection process. We're not completely certain. We just, under a week ago, had the notification that our plan to start the program was not accepted by ECA, and they preferred to defer the start of the year for the 25th class, at least until January of 2021. And depending on the COVID-19 situation, possibly beyond that. So we are in the process of consulting with the Japanese government, with the fellows in the 25th class, with our colleagues in Tokyo, and amongst ourselves here in the US, to figure out what that means for the 25th class program year. We don't believe in a curtailed program. It's unfortunate that the 24th class had to do less than a year. And we don't want to send our fellows over there for only 6 months. We think it merits a year. Japan is a tough country to understand. It's a difficult language and a complicated government. And it takes a year to produce the Mansfield Fellow alumni who then go on to contribute to the U.S. Japan relationship so effectively. So we are planning to do a full year for the 25th class, whenever that does start. and that pushes back the start of the 26th class, again, by at least 6 months, perhaps up to a full year. In all transparency, we're leaning towards a full year delay, which would mean a year from now, we'll be doing the same info session looking at an October application deadline. It's unfortunate, but that's the impact of coronavirus. I'm sure every federal agency is also struggling with planning, and work timelines are all similarly delayed or complicated by this. And obviously international travel is extremely difficult. One thing, we always really hope that our alumni sustain their engagement with Japan or build new engagement in the case where they came out of an agency that didn't have anything, to build something new. And we're really proud when there's a new bilateral dialogue process set up on human trafficking in the Department of Labor. We had a Department of Labor fellow who went over and spent time mainly with JICA and developed a really good relationship with them, and then on child labor and human trafficking work. And then the U.S. and Japan established a bilateral process. So that makes us feel proud that we've contributed, as I said earlier, another thread in the fabric of U.S. Japan cooperation. It's a little easier where the fellows come out of an agency like State or Air Force where there is a huge amount. But I'd love to hear from you guys what you've done since the program that dealt with Japan, either by establishing a new process or by welcoming high-level visitors and delegations or by facilitating any kind of bilateral cooperation. Charlie?
Well, as I mentioned, my office was already doing a lot of Japan work before I went out. Since I came back, I've been kind of fortunate to, in the position that I am, to kind of choose what it is that I want to focus on. And I've focused almost exclusively on Japan work since coming back. I'm still in regular contact with, actually with all of the offices that I worked with. In fact, just even this morning, I had a Zoom meeting with, I guess, the office that didn't want me, but we still work together. But even those officers that have rotated on, and their system is similar to ours, depending on the agency, where every 2 years they move on and do something different. But I still stay in contact with about a dozen people from different ministries that I had worked with. Every time my assistant secretary wants to travel to Japan, I've always gone with him. He knows that it's not just the meeting that you're going for; it's the dinners and the let's set up a meeting with you and someone with a national security secretary, for example, that we wouldn't normally have had the ability to set up, something that would have been much more complicated for our embassy even to set up. But building on personal ties that I established while I was out there, we could set it up very easily. We've done that 4 or 5 times in the 2 years since I've been back. So it's we had already been doing a lot, and now we just really knew how much more we could be doing. Taking advantage of Japanese stakeholders' presence here in Washington that we really hadn't spent a whole lot of time with. The private industry, for example, there's a federation of power utilities that's very influential in Japan's nuclear policy, for example, nuclear power policy. They have representatives here in Washington, and we weren't meeting with them at all before I went out and realized that seeing all this reporting coming in from Washington from these guys that I didn't even know existed. Now we engage with them all the time. So that's kind of finding new ways that we can be in touch. Things were right, in front of our eyes that we just didn't realize until Mansfield opened the door for me.
Those are such wonderful data points for proving the value of investing in a Mansfield Fellowship Program. And we hope that higher level supervisors can recognize that it's not just a perk or a reward, a year of human development for the individual they're sending. It's an investment in their entire office capacity. Monica, What did you have to add?
Sure. Well, I will give kind of my personal experience and then more broadly what I've seen with DoD Mansfield Fellows and how they've been utilized, because they're a little bit different. Personally, so when I completed the fellowship, I was stationed at Pacific Air Force's headquarters, and we have an international affairs division where we have basically a country director that leads the strategic development and execution of all of our Air Force to Air Force cooperation with all the different countries in the Indo-Pacific region. So when I went there, there was actually another Air Force fellow in my same class. And so we both went to the same division, and he was assigned the Japan desk and I was assigned the Australia desk. So I was not necessarily directly working every day with Japan, but the division there, frequently the fellowship feeds folks into that division. And so the division leadership knew about the fellowship. And if for whatever reason the Japan country director couldn't go greet the consul general of Japan or go do this or that, I was kind of like always the stand-in. Oh, you can speak some Japanese, like go. You've been to Japan. So that was, one smaller thing. But then through the years, on the side, and especially, coincidentally working with Australia, who has a very strong women, peace and security program. And I was, doing women, peace and security stuff for my command on the side as kind of an additional duty, but building that relationship with Australia in the same area that I had built it, with Japan, took a few years, but now, for example, I am this week in the afternoons part of a planning conference for an exercise, COPE North, which is a trilateral U.S., Australia, Japan air-to-air cooperation exercise. And there's a humanitarian assistance disaster response element of the exercise, and I'm the lead gender advisor for that. And so being able to now work, in that area that I gained expertise in Japan, I built additional relationships with Australia, and I'm now, working with all these three countries, coincidentally, or you could say it was just a slow progress to this point, where this is the first time where we will have gender advisors from all three nations participating to incorporate gender perspectives into the exercise. So it's really exciting. And then also, I had taught on a course in Fiji, a gender advisor course, led by, Fiji and then the New Zealand Defense Force. And they brought in guest instructors from Australia and also Japan. And so, being able to connect immediately with, someone from the Japanese Ministry of Defense who, I otherwise didn't know, but, oh, I was a Mansfield Fellow. Here's where I worked in the Ministry of Defense. Oh, here's this, that. Immediate connection. And I asked her to come instruct part of a course that I taught down at Yokosuka for 7th Fleet back in January. So being able to kind of maintain those ties, expand the network within this particular functional area, that's kind of, it's taken some time, but that's how it's paid off for me. For a lot of the other DoD fellows, so the Japan desk in PACAF and the Japan desk up at Indo-Pacific Command is almost always occupied by a former Mansfield Fellow, a uniformed former Mansfield Fellow, and we network with each other. We know each other, and so there's they're the ones taking the generals into Japan. They have the connections to, as Charlie mentioned, potentially set up meetings that otherwise would not be possible without those person-to-person relationships that they had built. So. I see a huge benefit for Department of Defense being able to utilize Mansfield alumni in those positions where they have the language, they have the cultural expertise, and they have actually the local knowledge of how to get around, where things are located, how long it's going to take from A to B. And that helped me when I taught another course down at Yokota, and I was so glad that I had been there many times. So I was able to plan that engagement in that course a lot more effectively, just having that sort of on the ground knowledge of how to get there and all that kind of stuff. So I think it has just paid dividends for Department of Defense, and I'm so grateful that the program exists.
Wonderful answer that makes us feel really good. I see another question asking for your one piece of advice for the 25th class. Monica, what would you say, pithy but heartfelt advice to the 25th class?
I, would just say be open to experience, be open to learning, go in with a growth mindset, and just be flexible and adaptable. That is going to probably be one of your keys to success, because you just don't, you can have a perfect placement plan, but things are not going to go the way you think they're going to go. And so just being open, rolling with the punches, being adaptable, and recognizing that every place you go, everything that you do is an opportunity to learn something new. And so just take advantage of that and have fun.
Charlie, what's your one piece of advice to the new class?
Well, that was it, but I'll give another one. I fully agree with everything Monica just said. I would suggest keep a journal. At every convenience store in Japan, you can find for 100 yen just a small notebook. And at each of your placements, before you go in, buy one of those. Record your thoughts of everything that happens during the day, what new words you might have learned in Japanese, what happened, what your thoughts are. The year is going to be a blur. It's going to go by very, very quickly, and you're going to learn a lot. And when you get back, there is a huge withdrawal process, kind of this re-entry back into the your previous life, and you will start thinking like, did that really happen? Did I do that? Having that record of what you were thinking, and what you had for lunch that day, and what kind of things you talked about, and what you were working on. There's going to be so many experiences that you're going to have, and you want to make the most of it and record as much of that as you can. It will help you with your learning Japanese along the way, by keeping in your journal, keeping a list of new vocabulary, a new grammar, a new points that you might have come across in your day-to-day. But it'll also be a very useful souvenir for you when you're done, when you've got this record of the things that you did, and you go back and you go, my God, I did that in Japanese. Like, regardless of where your level is, you're going to impress yourself over the course of the year. And it's good to keep a record of that to go forward, to prove to yourself 5 years from now that, yeah, I really did do that. That wasn't just an amazing dream.
That is wonderful advice. It's so important when you're in the moment and it's coming at you. Frank likes to say, like drinking from a fire hose. It is very intense and rich, and you'll move from placement to placement, so you're meeting a lot of people, and you can be so caught up in that and staying on top of it that you don't really take the notes and memos that you need. Pen and paper is great, and having that later to look back on will trigger all the memories and allow you to reflect on it. That's really wonderful advice. We'll add that to our orientation when we're starting the fellows up with their program. We're at almost 4, but I want to give you guys a chance for any other last thoughts of things that you thought you might want to say that I didn't ask, maybe about either the selection or the time in Japan, or things not to miss during the fellowship year, experiences that you want to highlight or flag for fellows.
One thing we didn't really talk about, sorry to jump in first here, but we didn't really talk about it's kind of the financial aspect of it. And I think just one thing to put people at ease, there are a lot of challenges over the year, dealing with new circumstances, new situations, different language, completely different culture, bureaucratic cultures, all of that. There are a lot of challenges. The challenges really aren't financial. The fellowship does a very good job, or at least they did the year that I was there, in making life as comfortable as possible for you, so that is one thing that you're not really worried about during the year. Tokyo is a very expensive city, yes, but financially, the just say it wasn't something we really had to worry about. That's if that's one thing that you're considering, can I financially afford to do this? It's a good question to ask, but it really hasn't been. Even speaking to someone who had 2 children and a wife, we were able to live very, very comfortably in a house that was very close to where I worked. My commute in Japan was far shorter than my commute here in Washington, D.C. So
that's quite a rarity.
Yeah.
Most Americans who move to Japan have a longer commute than they do back at home. But we do appreciate the generosity of the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs that lets us provide a stipend basically for cost of housing and cost of living allowances. It is a tax exempt benefit that you receive. You don't pay income tax on it because it's within the framework of being posted overseas. But it does make it, quite possible for you to live comfortably while you're in Japan. That's to the civilians. The military provides all of those separately in its own framework, and I think they're at least as generous, right, Monica?
Extremely generous. So yeah, as an active duty applicant and participant, it's just like a PCS going overseas. So you get an overseas housing allowance because you're not near base, so you can't stay on base, and you get a cost of living allowance, which being in downtown Tokyo, where you will be living, is both of those allowances are very generous and tax-free. So you will be able to live in a very nice place and have no issues financially. My other comment about kind of last, I guess, parting words, so to speak, is, we talk a lot about professional development and, what your agency is going to get out of it and how you as, career professional are going to gain all this stuff. But certainly don't forget that this is a personally enriching experience as well, and take advantage of living in Japan. I did a lot of hiking when I was there. I really wanted to explore different areas. The nature of Japan is just phenomenal. I think it's probably one of the hidden gems that people don't think of going to Japan for incredible hiking experiences. Oh, I should not say that. It's a hidden gem. That was amazing. I traveled down to Hiroshima. I went up to Sapporo for the annual snow festival. I went to Nikko, and I went to a fox village. I kind of Hakone, hot springs, ryokan, take the time to really enjoy Japan. There are some really great, day trips and weekend trips you can take. And what definitely helped that was being, making friends with the other fellows and their families as well. So I participated, not married, no kids. And so, becoming friends with, other fellows that have families or that have spouses. One of my very good friends still is one of the spouses of one of the other fellows, and she and I would go all over, and so just really enjoy living in Japan, not just working in Japan.
What a wonderful final point to make about this program. It is so enriching on every level, and we're really grateful for that. We'll try and do some more info sessions, and we'll post information on the website. It's mansfieldfellows.org. Once we have a determination of when the rescheduled selection process will happen. And I'm disappointed that we're not going to be pulling together a 26 class right away, but I do know that there will be one, and this program will continue for at least another 10 years, although you only get 1 year each. Sorry to Mark Jackson. It's a 1-year program now. But I want to thank my colleagues at the foundation for setting this up, Kelly Primrose and Tim White. And I want to thank our alumni, Monica Herrera and Charlie Mahaffey, for their time and their insights. Really grateful. It's wonderful to see you. And I look forward to gathering the next time we can in person. And thank you all for joining us today.
Wonderful. Best of luck to everybody.